They're doing a little dance here. Their phone's on the edge there. Guy drives by, just grabs it. See you later. Let the pension theft begin. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we've got Mark Carney and the Liberals doing some dirty tricks with Canadian pension funds. We've got some updates on Australia. There's more attacks planned over there that were prevented. We got a big merger deal that has officially gone through now. Got some other stuff. Let's jump into this. Starting this one off, we've got some polling data here. This is on F-35s and the Gripen. You know, Sweden came over, the king and the queen, and they're all pushing this stuff, and Sweden conveniently tied to Mark Carney and Brookfield. Remember this?
Actually, Westinghouse nuclear fuel facility in Sweden, in the city of Västerås, now owned jointly by the Canadian companies Brookfield and Cameco.
On top of that, Brookfield set up this Swedish AI data center for $9.91 billion. So there's major incentive here for Canada to buy Gripens over F-35s, even though Canada is already a part of the production line of F-35s. A bunch of those parts are made in Canada. Not to mention, F-35s are Gen 5 aircraft. They're far superior in every metric. And what do we see here? Continue with the F-35s, 13. Switch to Gripens, 43. Maintain both 29, none of the above 4, and 12. This is what happens when you get the public being hammered by this garbage media propaganda. The public thinks we should be switching to Gripens, but they don't know anything about them. They just heard it on CTV or CBC and like, oh, it sounds like a good idea. Those nice people came over from Sweden. Moving ahead, this scandal with Pablo Rodriguez, the pay for votes thing is blowing up, and Pierre Poilievre taking advantage of this. Poilievre calls on Carney to shed light on involvement of his MPs. CBC Watcher with the quote here, these are MPs, federal Liberal ministers who seem to have ties with the PLQ, so Mr. Carney and the Liberal Party of Canada need to answer all these questions. Basically tying Mark Carney and his party to Pablo Rodriguez in any way possible. Smart move. It puts a little bit of doubt in people's minds because, well, that is a Liberal Party and provincial one. That was one of Trudeau's ministers for many years. Moving ahead, we've got this. Canada has become a nation of charity Grinches. There's no wonder. I mean, look at this decline here. This is from 2000 to 2022. It's because life is so unaffordable in Canada. It's got prairies in BC, Canada, Ontario. It doesn't matter. Canadians don't have extra money because of bad policies over many years. Got this one here, the Tech Anglo-American deal. This is that one Mark Carney had to approve. This one here, Tech Resources. Though reportedly Carney pressured Anglo-American to relocate its headquarters to Canada as a condition for approving its proposed $53 billion acquisition of Tech. Apparently this has gone through now. Anglo-American has received regulatory approval from the government of Canada. Anglo-American and Tech set out a number of proposed commitments in September. Goes on to say Anglo-Tech will spend at least $4.5 billion in Canada within 5 years in connection with Highland Valley copper mine, life extension, enhancing critical minerals, etc., etc. Anglo-Tech to spend a total of at least $10 billion in Canada over 15 years. So this one's going to need some more digging because Anglo is attached to, well, Dominic Barton and Glencore and Mark Carney forcing this approval. And to top it off, this is in Kamloops where the whole area has been claimed by 2 First Nation bands. Technically, it's High Valley Copper, Kamloops and neighboring communities where our High Valley Copper employees typically live. There's more to this story than we know because obviously Carney wrapped up in this, pressuring Anglo-American to relocate. Clearly there's some money involved where Carney will make some of that if this was so important to him.
What Anglo-Tech was offering was not enough.
A sharp turn from last month, the industry minister has approved the merger between Anglo-American and Vancouver-based Tech Resources Limited under the Canada Investment Act. In a statement, Jolie details why she now believes the merger is of net benefit. The companies agreed to invest at least $4.5 billion in 5 years and at least $10 billion in Canada within 15 years. The headquarters will be in Canada, as will 2/3 of senior executives. And the 4,000 current Canadian jobs will be secured, plus 2,900 new jobs through the Highland Valley Copper Mine Life Extension Project. BC's premier recently visited that project, now calling the merger great news for BC, with Anglo-Tech the largest company in the province's history.
Our salmon watersheds are facing mine pollutions.
Environmental advocates like Northern Confluence will be watching carefully, concerned about water pollution and calling for better regulation.
There's also a bunch of liabilities that come with this takeover, and we really need to make sure that British Columbia holds to making sure that the polluter pays.
This merger.
British Columbia is now $12 billion in debt, thanks to David Eby. How he turned a $6 billion surplus into $12 billion deficit, nobody knows. Well, technically we know. It's all the street candy, giving out pipes and all sorts of ridiculousness, wasting taxpayer money. Quite clear Melanie Joly trying to hail this as her big win. I still can't figure out what the tie is here, aside from critical minerals. This is a major anchor of Mark Carney's agenda here. This will tie in with Brookfield at some point here. I'm guessing Brookfield will buy some company in involved with this Anglo-American tech deal here, or it will somehow work with this company. And for that reason, it's important their headquarters are located in Canada.
At a time when Canada is looking to protect and build its economic sovereignty, why is it the right move to allow Canada's largest mining company to be taken over by an international giant?
Because we're creating a Canadian giant. That's what we're doing. This was a net benefit for Canada. And why am I using the expression net benefit? Because it was my job under the Investment Canada Act to see whether it was a net benefit. So what do I mean by that? 4,000 jobs that are protected. It's nearly 3,000 new jobs being created. A headquarter in Vancouver for a global mining giant. And finally, the possibility of having a real impact in the development of our critical mining sector, the critical minerals sector in Canada at a time where we're competing with China.
These guys couldn't even be a part of the alliance, Trump's new PAC's Critical Minerals Alliance. We're directly above America and we're not a part of the Critical Minerals Alliance. And where's the media to ask these questions? They're always attacking Pierre Poilievre.
So that is why we decided to take this decision. More than that, actually 50% of the board will be Canadian for the next 7 years. After that, 33% of the board will remain Canadian. And at the end of the day, what we were able to do, David, for the first time in Canada's history, we're able to anchor the headquarter of Anglo Tech in Vancouver forever, in perpetuity, notwithstanding future transactions. So it's really good news for Vancouver, obviously. It's great news for BC, but it is also great news for Canada.
Somehow I think this is going to be going back to Brookfield. Nice to see Melanie Joly going back to her roots here, coming on CBC, as she was once a CBC reporter. This is a real thing. I believe she was an intern. Just saying. Moving ahead, we've got this bombshell. David Piccini, one of Doug Ford's ministers, caught in this massive scandal here. Integrity Commissioner to probe Ontario Labour Minister's handling of controversial training fund. He is under investigation here for this $2.5 billion fund. Ontario's ethics watchdog says it will investigate whether the province's Labour Minister contravened any laws in his handling of a controversial training fund. The investigation will determine if Ontario Labour Minister David Piccini contravened sections of the Members' Integrity Act 1994. He administered the $2.5 billion Skills Development Fund. So basically, they put a bunch of money in this fund and then they dished it out companies for skills development, except he chose the companies. This sounds exactly like what? The SDTC scandal. The Liberals giving out piles of money to their well-connected insider friends for the Eco-Green Fund. It says here in early October, Auditor General Shelley Spence issued a special report with damning findings on how the $1.3 billion in the fund was awarded. Spence said selection process for funding was not fair, transparent, or accountable. Piccini has defended the fund and his close involvement in selecting recipients. He has denied any wrongdoing and continued to award the funding in the weeks since the auditor's report was made public. It's one dirtbag hanging out with another here. These guys all seem to be the same here. No wonder Doug Ford gets along so well with Mark Carney. Moving ahead, we've got Trump suspending a $40 billion tech deal with the UK.
Officials have said the US has paused a $40 billion technology agreement with Britain. It's following concerns in Washington over London's approach to digital regulation and food standards. The so-called tech prosperity deal covered AI, quantum computing and civil nuclear energy, and was agreed during Donald Trump's state visit in Britain in September. Britain hailed the visit as proof of Prime Minister Keir Starmer's ability to work with Trump on trade and tech. It became the first country to agree in principle to lower some US tariffs in May, but implementation has been slow. Talks on sectors such as steel stalled, though the two sides agreed a framework pharmaceutical deal earlier this month. British officials confirmed on Tuesday that the US has paused implementation of the tech deal. The New York Times said US officials were frustrated by Britain's online safety rules, digital services tax and food safety restrictions.
So too many draconian rules and taxes. They brought out their digital ID and Trump's like, no more. They lost this big agreement here. SpaghettiOs. I guess this is what happens when you run the country into the ground. Also from America, we got this. We'll just briefly touch on this. RFK Jr. announced that he signed a directive banning all surgeries to younglings, changing from the blue team to the red team or the red team to the blue team. You can see what's on the screen here. They're banning all surgeries. This is a very stark difference as compared to, say, the UK. Moving ahead, look at this bombshell. Ottawa to shift nearly $1 billion from public service pension fund to general revenues. Who would have thought? Mark Carney's got a dirty plan here. So what is this? Federal government is shifting nearly $1 billion in surplus funds from the public service pension fund into general revenues, a move that is legally allowed but sharply criticized by unions. No kidding. It is the latest step in a plan first announced in the November 4th budget to use surplus pension funds to offset cost of $1.5 billion early retirement incentive as a way of shrinking the size of public service. So what they're doing here is trying to get people to retire early, and there's a penalty. As we can see here, it's a 5% per year penalty, reduction of 5%. Either it's you have 30 years of service by age 60 or at least 2 years of service age 65, something like that, and you get your full pension. But if you retire early, for example 5 years as it says here, then you'd have a reduction of 25% permanently reduced if you retire early. Well, what they're doing here is allowing people to retire early, but then having to pay that penalty essentially for this. They're using pension fund money. Taxpayers pay into this as well as the government, but this is not mutually beneficial. It's only beneficial for the government to try to get people to retire early, thus reducing the workforce. Mentioned the previous video, 28,000 people they want to reduce the workforce by. They're essentially trying to bribe them or carrot and stick with early retirement without penalties. It says the act states that the size of the pensions fund ratio cannot exceed 125%. And because it's a little bit over, instead of funneling this money into having better benefits for the union, for people paying into the fund, the government's just going to take it and take advantage of it. It says there is significant uncertainty on how many public servants will accept the early retirement incentive, but assumes 25% of eligible members will do so and retire. See, they don't know, and that's the problem here. If everyone takes it, as it says here, that $1.5 billion number might climb to $2.8 billion, and suddenly there's a problem. The report said such a cost would result in a funded ratio of 124.8% and no non-permitted surplus. The size of the core public service reached a peak of 367,000 employees in 2024 and then falling to 357,000 this year. The budget announced a plan to reduce it by 30,000 people for 5 years. So they're using this carrot and stick, taxpayers' money, to offer early retirement instead of giving better benefits. So it goes on to say here, Sean O'Reilly, president of the Professional Institute of Public Service of Canada, said in a statement that it is alarming to see the government treat the pension surplus as a piggy bank it can access at will. The union said surpluses should be used to strengthen the plan either through a joint contribution holiday or by improving benefits. Using workers' own pension surpluses to finance their departure sets an extraordinary and dangerous precedent, he said. It hollows out our public service at precisely the wrong moment. No employee should ever be permitted to unilaterally appropriate workers' deferred compensation and repurpose it for their own purposes. The Public Service Alliance of Canada has also criticized the practice of shifting surpluses into general revenue as promoting a stop pension theft campaign. This sets a bad precedent because companies might start doing this too. If the government's doing it, well, we can do it too, and that's the problem. And when the leader at the top, the prime minister, acts a certain way, such as helping Brookfield dodge billions of dollars in taxes, people are like, well, maybe I should dodge taxes too. When you see it happening at the top, it always filters down. And the same thing can happen with the pension funds here. Corporations might be like, well, I'm going to do this too. While corporations have stricter rules, the government of Canada sets the rules and are taking advantage of it. Bunch of crooks. Jumping over to some world news, what do we have here? 5 people have been caught by Australian police due to intel that they were going to carry out another attack on Bondi Beach. So what you see here is just one vehicle, and as this account posted, 5 Islamists traveling to Bondi Beach. It turns out it wasn't just 5, it was 7 of them, and it was 2 cars. Police have detained 7 men in Sydney's southwest in connection with possible planned bad times. Another attack. This is what happens when you let unvetted terror lords into your country. Canada has hundreds of them, thanks to the Liberals. Here we have the commissioner saying that the 2 that carried out the previous attack at Bondi Beach, they're radicalized by ISIS.
This was about extremism. This was ISIS-inspired. We know ISIS distorts and corrupts Islam, which leads to radicalization.
If that's not crazy enough, we've got Australia, France, and Germany now canceling Christmas events and New Year's fireworks. Why? Because they let in too many terror lords into their countries. It's too dangerous now. We have these people who jump in a big van and just plow through a bunch of people at a Christmas market or fireworks or whatever it may be.
A beautiful and spectacular event, and it has all been canceled because the French government can no longer keep its own people safe from potential radical Islamic terrorists that they have welcomed into their country.
This report gets deep into it, but we can't put it on the channel here. They don't really like that stuff on YouTube. These problems don't just exist over there. We have them here. We now have a car service for the Jewish community because they're not safe amidst anti-Semitic Uber incidents. National Post reported on 2 more anti-Semitic incidents involving Toronto residents and the ride-sharing company and bringing the total to 3. Doesn't matter where you look, we've got a couple girls in the UK with a phone set up here taking a video, and what happens? Okay, we can have music in there, but they're doing a little dance here. Their phones on the edge there. Guy drives by, just grabs it. See you later. These are the kind of people that these leftist government leaders are bringing in. Just absolute monsters, such as with this. As this guy posts, this is what happens when you import millions of third world animals. I don't know how else you'd describe this. This is in Stockholm, Sweden. So you can see there's a bunch of phones and stuff, and they're just tearing them off. I don't know if this looks like a Apple store or something like that.
Nu ser man att det är ett ungdomsgäng som bryter sig loss från den andra demonstration.
These people are all animals. What else do you call them? These people all need to be in jail. And we've also got Palestinian protesters screaming at people at a Christmas market because this is Canada now.
Jesus was born has been under attack by the Zionist entity. And absolutely, that Jesus is Palestinian. And if Jesus...
No, Jesus is not Palestinian. You guys are a bunch of idiots that need to go home. This is what the liberals have allowed to come into our country. Arrest, deport, yes, immediately.